Hello, it's Mrs. Schoaf here, and I'm going to show you a little bit about in-text citations. Anytime you have information from one of your sources that you would like to include in your writing, you have to include an in-text citation. Whether this information is paraphrased or directly pulled from the source, it's important that you cite it so that it's not considered plagiarism. So questions to ask yourself: when you take information word for word from the source, you need to introduce your direct quote, you need to use quotation marks around the information from the source, and you need to include the author or the first words in the title with the page or paragraph number inside parentheses at the end of the sentence. Here's one example of an in-text citation. It could also be known as a parenthetical citation, and as you can see in the source citation, which would be on your works cited page or your annotated bibliography, we do have the last name of the author, and the last name is Holland, so you would include that at the end of your direct quotation, and you would also include a page number if the source is a source that was not found on the internet. So a book or a magazine, you would find the page number and include it in your parenthetical citation. Also notice that there is an introduction or at least a section of the sentence that's in your own words, and then there are also quotation marks around the source. If you use the title of the source or the author's name in your sentence, you do not have to include it in the in-text citation. For instance, we're going to use the same author, so Holland recognized that, so I introduced my quote with the author's last name, and since I did that, I didn't have to include it in the in-text citation, but I did still include the page number, and as you can see, there still are quotation marks. If there is no author, then you simply use the first few words in the title. So whatever appears in the first few words of the source citation is what you would use in your in-text citation. Here's an example. Instead of having the author's last name, we have 10 tips because the title of the article is 10 Tips on Writing the Living Web. So once again, I have an introduction, then I have my quotation marks because it is a direct quote, and inside my parentheses, I have 10 tips, which is the first two words of the article, and I use quotation marks around those words. And another way to cite information, if you did get the article from the website, instead of using the page number, you might be asked to use the paragraph number. So I put PAR period 28. And you'll have to talk to your teacher to see if they prefer a paragraph number if there's no page number. And if they don't, then you would just simply leave it out and end your parentheses and then put the period after your parenthetical citation. If there is one or more author, all you have to do is include all of those authors' last names in your source citation. So here's our source citation that would appear in our works cited page. And as you can see, I start by introducing the citation with the 3 authors. And then since I already used their last names in my actual sentence, I don't include it in the source citation, but I do have my page number. And this would be paraphrased because there are no quotation marks. In this second sentence, though, I just simply say that the author state. So I would have quotation marks because it is a direct quote, and then I would include the author's last names inside the parenthetical citation with the page number. If your information then is paraphrased, you still need to cite the source, but you do not need to use quotation marks. And once again, as you can see, there's no author, so I just included the first few words from the article's title, and they should be the first few words that appear in your source citation in your works cited page. And here, I just gave an example of what an in-text citation would look like without a page or paragraph number. So if it is an electronic source and your teacher doesn't want you to use paragraph numbers, then this is what it would look like. If two or more sources have the same title, then you continue to include the next portion of the works cited list entry in the in-text citation. And here's a quick example of that. So both of these sources have the title Snowy Owl. So I included the next word in the source citation, which this one had hinterland as the next word, and this one had Arctic. So you include the next word until it distinguishes one source from the other. And once again, I showed how to include paragraph numbers if your teachers request that. If you have one or more source in one in-text citation, so if you have a sentence that uses two different sources, you would include the first author's last name or the first few words in the title of that source, and then if you were asked to include the paragraph number, it would look like that. And you include the semicolon then to separate the two and distinguish one source from another, and then the next author's last name or the first few words in the title and the paragraph if your teacher requests that, and then you'd have the period at the end. Block quotations are for direct quotes that precede or have, more than 4 lines. So if it is longer than 4 lines, then you'll have to do a block quote. And this is basically what it would look like, except it would need to be double spaced. So here I introduce the quote, Nellie Dean treats Heathcliff poorly and dehumanizes him throughout her narration. And then you put a colon, and as you can see, then the actual direct quotation is indented. So the whole text is indented. You don't need quotation marks, but the source citation or the in-text citation comes after the last period. So you have the author's last name and then the page number, and that comes after the last period. So if you would continue on in this paragraph, then the next sentence would align with your first introductory sentence. So like I said before, if it is a book or it's actually like a source that you can flip through, then you will need to find the page number. But if your source is electronic, do not include the page numbers that are listed on your article if you print it off, but you might be asked to use the paragraph number. If your teacher doesn't want you to use the paragraph number, like I said before, you would just include the author's last name or the first word in the title. So something to think about when you're integrating your direct quotes or your paraphrased information into your writing, you always want to introduce the information in some way. Always cite the information. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you paraphrase it, you still need to include an in-text citation, and then explain its significance. Don't simply stick in a direct quote without explaining why it's important or what it means or how it adds to your research. If you have some time, you can practice these. This is directly pulled from a source, and the source does have an author, and the author's last name is listed here. And if you would want to include the page number, you could say it's from page 16. So how would you introduce this quote and then have an in-text citation for this quote? And if you want to practice a little bit more using a source that does not have an author for the last name, then you can say that this would be a direct quote, and you would need to introduce this direct quote, and then you would need to include quotation marks around it with a source citation and the first word or 2 words in the title of the article. And this would be indented when you include it in your works cited page at the end. So if you have any more questions on in-text citations, please watch this video again or talk to your teacher and they will be happy to help.